So, I know I just want to take a few minutes to kind of go through this. Um, in terms of, I know I've been kind of referencing in several of the sessions about community. If you have community access, you'll be able to do a lot of things, see a lot of information and stuff. So this is what community looks like. I forgot what Sriram, you were saying for PeopleSoft it is. So over here, I don't know how it's very different or if it's maybe the same thing. The thing is, like with Workday, they don't give you like real. I think people used to mention like people books or something like that. Like you don't get like real hard copies of anything during a release. Everything is just here online.
Okay.
If you're an implementer, so you're working with a partner, then you get access and you get access to different areas, like some things I'm not seeing here. The person that I'm logged in as, they don't have access to like the services area, right?
Right.
That's where the consultants and stuff. And so they give you a lot more information because, of course, if the partner is successful, then Workday is going to be successful, right? And then they'll have more referenceable customers. So there's a whole other part of community that's geared towards that. This is the more customers that are live, the customer facing aspect of it. You know, they break it up into several different areas. You could look at HCM. They won't restrict, like let's say I've only, implemented HCM, that's the only module that I'm kind of live on or I'm going live on. They won't restrict what parts of community you see. You'll still be able to see everything, right? Like somebody that's doing HCM, unless they're like an institution or something, that's the only time they'll probably need really student. But any other like Walmart or any other names, they're probably not going to be looking at student, for instance, right? Like that really applies to institutions that want to use Workday. They could be using Workday with all these other things, but like this is, you know, geared towards the higher ed space. So you're not restricted there, but for the like I know that they just contracted with, I forgot what government that implemented it. So it's geared towards that, right? Like they
Right.
probably live on HCM, but then there's something very specific to their needs that are around education and government. Yeah. So over here, I don't think it's like, and let's see. I haven't really searched for that kind of thing. I know that they have user groups, but those user groups are kind of set up by Workday in the sense like if they have a new feature that's coming out and they want like very specific customers, there's something called design partner groups, and they reach out to customers. Like let's say they just want to know who's like, I don't know, a specific requirement, like who wants masking on social security numbers, right? Like that could affect everyone in all these different areas. And then they go ahead and pick and choose the customers. Like they're probably going to pick some large institutions or larger customers, put them together with smaller customers and like have these one-on-one discussions about brainstorming, collaborating, and understanding their use cases. In terms of actually just creating their own user groups, let's see. I haven't, because I feel like the way that they do it, let me see if I'm wrong. See, these user groups are, I feel like, yeah, these product user groups, I felt were initiated by Workday, but let's see. Yeah, so Workday, I don't know if that's the case in Oracle or if I'm answering the right question, but I feel like the groups are first initiated by Workday, and then of course you could join it. You could be able to ask your questions there. You'll see questions from Workday on there, or if they have like specific alerts, like something's changing, they want to kind of give you a heads up. They'll let you know in these calls, and then you also have the design partner groups. And then there's another thing. Let me see if I could easily get to it. That seems like it's not who's Blue Cross Blue Shield plans. I mean, I don't know. That's fine. It helps me see something different that I haven't seen. And then what was the other thing that I was going to touch on? Oh, you know, a lot of times people ask questions, just open forum, not specifically from a specific user group or something like that. And then Workday can respond, other customers might respond, even consultants might respond. Then, of course, again, like I'm just trying to understand Oracle and PeopleSoft space too at the same time, I guess, is you can open brainstorms if you don't see what you know, like you're expecting to see, or like there's an enhancement that would make your life so much easier, or maybe like there was a policy change, right? Like again, like these vaccines, and like this whole coming back to the office, and they had to respond with like adding employees adding and monitoring different information for them, like uploading like have they gotten vaccinated or not. So Workday had to respond, and that was actually through a brainstorm. They opened up a brainstorm, they escalated it, different customers did, and Workday definitely saw it as a need as well. So then they moved probably like a couple of features that were supposed to be delivered for that release. They moved that around so that way that this could come in. And then this other thing about like what's, you know, what's new posts about like anything that's coming like in their weekly updates or big features that are coming out, those will be here. There'll be videos and on them, and usually they're anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes, but as you can imagine, like all those different areas that were listed, HCM financials, you can just imagine how many videos are out there. So it's really trying to prioritize which ones make sense to watch. What I've done a lot of the times is like, you know, multitasking, have them on in the background, see if that there's anything that I really need to be aware of that's going to change my day-to-day. Here's kind of the release schedule. Let's open that up so I could showcase that. So this is how I was saying it's done by releases, and they kind of help you know. So when they're saying release preparation window, this is like when they'll start moving things to preview. So they can move things to preview at any time so that way you can test it out and stuff. But usually the larger features or some of, I think, the areas they like to just not push it out to preview early, they kind of wait for this release preparation window. And this is generally like 4 weeks in advance of the actual when they're going to move things to production. So their hope is that everybody's testing around this time. And then, you know, if they don't hear any major feedback about like things aren't working or, you know, that it's not as buggy, you know, of course, software, there's always going to be bugs, but if it's not like something that impacts the customer negatively or produces bad data, they'll go ahead and make sure that it's released on this appropriate day. And generally the tenants at that time, and we kind of saw that when they were kind of doing preview light up, sort of at the middle of this course, that tenants weren't available. And that was the reason, because they take longer, I guess, because of the pushes that are going out. And what I've seen with alerts, you'll see alerts here as well. When tenants are going to take a while, or the maintenance is taking a while, you could sign up for notifications, or you can just come out to community and see that they're taking some time. But you know, great resource. This is like where I kind of live and kind of see what's going on with other customers, other questions that are kind of bubbling up, voting on brainstorms. So you end up running that what's new report, and you select, you know, the areas that you're interested in, and then see if that there's anything major that you need to react to. So it's only 4 weeks. I know
That's
I was
less
at,
time.
yes, yes. But what I would say is like they start releasing kind of their roadmap of what they're going to be doing for the current release, um, like at the beginning of, let's say, several months out. So like over here, March 13th is for release one. And then they'll, around that time in March or April, they'll kind of let you know very high level what they're working on. You don't know if it'll actually make it or not. I see that even if they say that they're going to do certain things, out of the 10 things that they say, sometimes they only end up delivering 2. And then they say like they ran into issues, or there were like different other escalations that came up from customers, they're bigger customers or they're more strategic customers or something like that. But it doesn't really like, it'll just be something like, oh, we're going to work on contact information. You may not know what specifically that they're going to work on in terms of contact information, but that's kind of the heads up you get. And believe me, I've been in a lot of user sessions where people are really upset about that. They're upset about like several different things. This is one of them. And then the second one is, right, like a brainstorm might be out there for like something really small, like for instance, you can have questionnaires where you can ask questions, and if you want somebody to return a decimal as an answer, you can't configure it because they don't, for whatever reason, support it. And I think it has like 600 votes from different customers on it. I think it was specifically like, if you want to enter your GPA, LinkedIn was like a big customer that was really escalating it. I saw on that brainstorm. And everybody was hopping on with their use cases of all the different reasons. And for me, it seems like such an easy thing to do. And they're like, just the way it's currently designed and the framework and all this other stuff, it's not as easy to, just to show you what this all looks like. But the thing that I want to highlight is this area kind of becomes your friend in terms of if you're going through any new sort of territory. So let's see, this was a question. So somebody asked a question. Yeah, and then, yeah, I know that they've gotten much, much better. So you can just imagine, right? Like when they used to just do weekly updates and sometimes they'd push out like major features and you didn't even get to, there was no concept of preview tenants where you can actually play with this and tell them like if there's an issue and stuff. They would just keep on moving things out. They'd end up breaking, like, I'd come in on a Monday and it'd be like, oh, all these things aren't working. Now I needed to open a support case and try to figure out like what I need to update, what I need to configure differently. And it used to be very disruptive. So here are the alerts that I was talking about. So especially around, if they push something out and unexpectedly it caused a regression somewhere else or a bug somewhere else, you'll kind of see it here letting you know that, just like it says here, product defect, or maybe that they push something out, people didn't test it as heavily in preview. And once it moved to prod, it was like, what is it called? It became an issue. So they're just letting all the customers know rather than everybody submitting cases. What I've seen in the past is like, let's say I notice an issue, I escalated that this is really impacting our business. We can't continue doing what we need to do. Then they go ahead, they'll put an alert out there. So that way, I think what ends up happening when I spoke to a support analyst is they end up getting so many cases. So you're just getting overwhelmed trying to respond. So this is a good way to kind of be proactive. When it's just a couple of customers, what I've seen them do, because it's happened to me, is they have some way of finding out who's using kind of what through some sort of reporting or analytics stuff that I guess that they have in these logs. They'll end up reaching out to you through a case and being like, we are proactively opening this case and these are the reasons. This is when it might just be that this is when the issue is going to get resolved, or we actually need to take your tenant down. And this happens very rarely. It's, I think, only happened 2 times in the time that I've been working. Is we need to take your tenant down. They call it a hot patch, and they just go ahead and they'll specifically update my tenant because I've been escalating something, and then they'll release it out to everyone else at the same time. That's the only time that you're kind of on different versions in a way, where they might just fix your specific tenant, like if you're escalating enough or you're upset enough, but they rarely kind of do that. So that's the alert stuff. And generally before, this was really used for before even product defects, like more for operations, like if your tenants are not coming back up after the maintenance window. There's only been a couple of times where it's been really bad, like the whole weekend, you haven't been able to get the tenant back up. So you can only imagine how upset all these customers are, because there's global customers, right? Like already to have a tenant down for a while. And actually, I'd love to show this brainstorm. I know I'm going on a little bit of tangent, but this will kind of show you the thing. I don't see it here, but basically what it is severity 1, production down, or like unresponsive. Like if you're in a tenant, and I've seen that too, like everything is just kind of at a standstill. It's just spinning, right? Like you might be logged in, but you don't see anything on the screen, or you're trying to click on something and it's just spinning, and it has nothing to do with Wi-Fi or like internet or anything like that. It's just performance probably issues, right? So that's a sub 1. And then of course, like if you have like a key deadline, like payroll, all hands on deck sort of thing, this needs to go out at a certain time, otherwise people aren't going to get paid. That's kind of like a sub 1. Sub 2 is like the urgency, again, like there's some sort of deadline. Sometimes like people mistakenly even put production down as severity 2, but sub 1, they need to respond like almost immediately. And it could just be like, hey, we just saw your case, we're kind of looking into it, but you're going to get updates like almost every 15 minutes, every 20 minutes as to kind of what's going on. Sev 2, it's kind of like on an hourly basis, and their thing is to respond, I think, within 3 hours. But they generally, like what I've seen is like every time you open up a case, as soon as like it goes, I guess, into their queue, you'll get a kind of a generic response, we received your case. But it actually is like not just automatically added, because I was asking them this one time. It actually is like once it goes to the support analyst, they actually update it. So it's an actual human that updates the case and is kind of looking at it. So that's good. And then Sev 3s, 4s, and 5s, they're kind of the same thing. I don't know why they have so many different ones, but it's kind of like, hey, we're noticing an issue, or like, I think this might be an issue, but it might be a configuration issue too. Those kind of sit around for a while unless they're like super easy for them to troubleshoot, what I've seen. And sometimes like if it turns out that it's probably more of a configuration issue, they'll go ahead and just send you towards community and be like, hey, look for certain things, or they'll just find a link on here and then send that to you. And then, or like you're really looking for an enhancement. You shouldn't be opening up a case because it's not like an actual product defect. So that's kind of frustrating when you start in the beginning, because they'll always send you to a brainstorm, and then you'll go to the brainstorm. And again, like I said, there's like 300, 400 votes on it. And like, unless like you keep escalating it with them, nobody's going to really look at it. And if you're not working with a big customer, let's say, or one of their strategic customers, it's not going to get worked on. And the other thing I guess I should point out, so between Sev 1 and Sev 5, so hopefully that explained that they kind of have the same tier thing. They're just called severities. And then you also get to say, like, is it implementation? So you'll have to say the tenant, like environment that it's in. So implementation, sandbox, preview, prod, and then you get to put the severity. So if it's not prod and it's rarely they're going to let you keep it as a Sev 1, Sev 2 in sandbox, but those are usually 3s, 4s, and 5s. Sandbox, preview, and impl tenants. Did that help?
Yes.
Okay, so this one only has 2 words. I wanted to get to the interesting one, but I don't see it here. But I'll go to this one. This only says two votes, but there's another one that's out there about tenant downtime. So any customer, any partner can go ahead, open these brainstorms. So they're looking for enhancements, and then you get to vote on it. So if I select up, and I'm not going to do that, but because then they can actually see who's voted on it too. So you might not even leave a comment, but when you upvote something, it's happened to me before. I didn't leave a comment and I was like, how did you guys find out that I voted on it? And you just select, of course, like up or down, and then they get to see it and they're kind of tracking it. And usually somebody that's like a product owner on their side, like a PM, may respond over here like, hey, that's great. And they might have follow-up questions, or they may say that this is not within vision. We're just gonna kind of leave it here for right now and gather use cases. So basically they're just trying to give it time for more and more people to vote on it. The nice thing is that people end up, saying like over here, they're not saying their specific use case, but let's say this didn't capture everything. Then somebody else adds their use case, their use case. The interesting thing is what I've noticed is, let me see if I could find that one, and then I'll really get back to the actual thing for today. I don't think there's any, it's just specifically in certain areas, for some reason, I don't know what it is that it's not supported. So like you see over here, 343 votes on this brainstorm, and it's been open since 2016. It's been read 1,378 times, and you'll see as they kind of sit here longer and longer, people get more and more upset. So this is, see over here, I believe she, if I'm not mistaken, she probably did own the area at some point, but now it's this new person. So they try to make sure that they kind of let you know that they see your updates. There's usually a reason as to why that they can't put it in, and they try to address those, like if they have these design partner group sessions, or you go to, before when we used to be able to go to Rising, right? And so that's that user conference where they could talk about features that are coming up or kind of gotchas. And it was a great place to go and talk to the people at Workday and kind of get to know them, one on a more personal level, but be able to discuss your own issues. They'd have like booths set up and you could talk to them and stuff. So that used to be really fun. Okay, so last time we met, we kind of talked more about configurable security, and this is the compensation stuff, and then how like security groups, like how there's so many different types, but the ones that generally we talk about are really user-based and role-based. And then how the Workday tenant itself is kind of broken up into different functional areas. Of course, you could create your own, but generally I haven't had to do that. You kind of just go with the way that they've kind of configured it and delivered it. So, and then based on the functional area, you have these domains and business processes, which, domains, again, they tell you the tasks, reports, they kind of bucket all of the similar tasks together, the similar reports, report fields together. And then you just need to make sure that your security group has access, view, or modify for those specific domains. And then the other thing that drives security and what you can do is the business process area, making sure that the appropriate security groups have access in that workflow to either initiate, approve, or kick off another sub-business process. So we'll go into that hopefully today. And then just going a little bit more into the role-based and user-based. So role-based is manually assigned, and you kind of saw that right on the supervisory org. You get to manually assign a specific role, and then you could tie it to a security group, and then it's assigned to the position, right? And then if you do it at the top most level, then it just gets inherited until you want to kind of break that chain. And if you, let's say you wanted one specific group, the legal department, everybody else has kind of the same HR partner, but you want a different group of people to do the HR partner like work, then you just assign it for that org. And then user-based, it's assigned to a person, and this is where you're really looking. So this is all org-based, the role-based ones, but this is like tenant-wide that, security administrator, it shouldn't, most of the time, it doesn't matter which org they're part of, you just want the security group to have kind of all access to do the security administrator type work. And then really important, when you're creating your own security group, like of course Workday has many delivered ones, you just want to really make sure like which one you're kind of selecting, the role-based or user-based one. Depending on like, do they just need access to specific orgs and tied to specific orgs, or are you just looking for them to kind of have free range and be user-based? Once you assign the security group under that specific domain policy, you want them to have access to specific tasks and reports. Just make sure once you add the security group and update that domain policy that you select, do they just need to view it, or do they actually need to make changes to it? And of course, if they need to make changes to it, they'll automatically get access to view it because that checkbox is automatically selected. And then the key thing to kind of go over again over here is like, when you're making any of these changes, and especially when you have multiple screens open, you sometimes forget to do this. This happens, and sometimes it even comes up as a question. And when I think about the interviews, it's less about going into the nitty-gritty. It's most of the time just making sure you have some kind of familiarity with Workday, because they even understand things are, for the most part, like generally stable, but things are changing. And once you get your hand on a tenant, it's very easy to test in these preview or sandbox tenants. But it's really important to make sure that you activate your pending security policy changes. And it's through this specific task, activate pending security policy change. And then once you do that, then you'll be able to see your changes. Any questions? Okay. So let's see. And this is kind of another view that I found that might be helpful is you have all these users, right? Everybody kind of needs different access to the tenant, and the way that they're going to get this access is, and just further emphasizing, you could be a user, but if you're not added to any of the security groups, you probably won't be able to do anything, right? You need to be added to either these role-based or user-based security groups. And again, there's many that are like for role-based are delivered by Workday. So HR partner, compensation partner, benefits partner, all those partner ones, and even the tenant-wide ones, the user-based ones. Oh, yep. So, of course, you could use the Workday delivered reports, right? And if they're not there and you're looking for specific pieces of information, you could just create your own report. What I'm doing here is creating a copy of one of their delivered reports, and we'll get into that when we're going over the reporting stuff. But if it's business object, I kind of think of it as over here, the security group is just called security group, right? And then you could build your own report if this didn't have what you wanted on it, this report that I was just running, that's a Workday delivered one, and you could add other fields onto it. Does that help to this? All right. So we were talking about the only way users have access is through these security groups. And then there's two ways that the security groups kind of what you end up seeing or what you end up doing in the tenant is through these security policies. So this one, domain security policy, like I said, view and modify. And then get and put is basically outside of the UI. If you have an integration running or you're kind of using some sort of app, web services for downstream systems, it's kind of the same thing. Get is kind of like the view, pulling the data out of Workday, and put is updating the information. So the integration system users, which we'll get into, kind of have to work with that access. And then BP security policy, which is really where we're going to be kind of diving into today, is where you get to initiate the BP, you get to view and approve, rescind, cancel, correct, and delegate. So basically just BP again is just a workflow, and it's being able to have certain people do the steps in the workflow. Going back up here, when you see that these domains, again, reports, tasks, web services, Custom report fields, that's what that is. RDS is report data sources, background processes, which is basically like the integrations kind of running it and other. So all these domains may have subdomains, but everything that's in these domains and subdomains is all included here. And then business processes is just this. You can have multiple business processes and you just need to make sure that they're configured appropriately, and we'll go through that today. Sorry, the Zoom stuff keeps on getting in my way, so I have to keep doing this. All right, so this is kind of giving an overview of BPs, and I'll probably say the same thing a couple of times, but they're probably just going to be in different, like some of them are going to be on the PowerPoint slide, some of them are going to be in the tenant. But what we'll see is, like, on a BP, you have initiating step, and that's always there. So what we've done in the past, and what I'll show you in a little bit, is when we kind of do copy BP definition, right? And I select none of the above. Basically, the only step that's visible and is ordered as A is the initiating. And initiating is in every BP. You can't take that one away, because even if you don't have any steps processed or any steps configured in that BP, it just needs to trigger something. Otherwise, it's going to trigger as a default definition. It just has to trigger a BP. And even if there's no step in there, like let's say when you're hiring, but that step is always included in the BP. It won't do anything. It's just saying that I used this specific BP when you were kicking off the hire process. So, and we'll get it. I think all of this will be more and more clear as I go through like the BP, but in terms of, you could set a complete step. So let's say you have all these other things kind of as optional. So you could set the complete step before or after these, but you just need to make sure these other steps are optional. And then, of course, when you go to, you'll probably have reports out there to kind of notify you that, when you run them, that this person still doesn't have compensation, or you can put alerts letting you know that, hey, you skipped this step, but this person doesn't have compensation. Or when you actually go on the specific profile, right? Like when you go to the related actions, you'll see that some of these things are still pending for this specific person. Okay, so that was about the initiating one. And then so on the BP, like you'll see, you can go ahead and on every org or the top level org, you get to assign the BP that you want to use for every specific workflow, right? For proposed compensation, for hire, for termination, all that stuff. You'll be able to let Workday know, for this specific org, what do you want? What BP should I be using? And then let's see. Then you have all those steps that are configured for your workflow, the approval steps, the to-do steps, the action steps. And then based on that, whichever security group you have configured, they'll get notifications, be it in their Workday inbox or be it an email. It all depends on how you kind of have that set up. And then once that BP is triggered, so it knows which specific org, it knows the security group that it needs to be sending these notifications to, every BP, like let's say, the best way I could say is by an example. If I've said that, I need to hire somebody for Global Modern Services, I kick off the BP that's associated with it. As soon as I kick off that BP, a BP event gets created that I'm hiring Logan McNeil, and this is the workflow that we're going to be following. And that's her event to say, okay, this person went through step B, they approved, now it's waiting on step C. So that whole thing is an event, and I'll show you that in the tenant. So here we go. So here's a sample of a hire process, right? Like you have an initiation step where certain security groups can go ahead and initiate this. So not everyone, right, will have access to be able to hire an employee, but the ones that have access to based on this specific security group can go ahead and initiate it. Then there's a sub business process, meaning like, you could string multiple business processes together in one kind of workflow, right? So proposed compensation is a different business process, but after the initiation step, it's going into this sub business process, and you have a manager that's proposing and approving the compensation. Then you have an HR partner that's reviewing it. Then you might have an approval chain where not only, and this could be conditional, and we'll go into conditional as well, but you might have several people that you need to approve it. And meaning approval chain is like, you might be hiring into specific org. Let's say I'm the manager for that org, but I also need my manager's approval as well. So after I approve, it'll go to her or his inbox, and he'll get to see and be able to approve. And then the last thing might be a to-do step. And we'll go through each one of these in detail as to what these are. So let me see. So yeah, the business process, this is just kind of an overview again, is the business process framework. That's kind of like all of this is kind of just called a framework, right? Lets you define and implement BPs to suit the way your company works. So making it as configurable as possible. Workday does deliver their own default definitions, but that doesn't mean that you can't change it. They just kind of start you off, right? Like with the workflows that, but you could define them any way you like, and you can choose the tasks that compose a BP and in what order they must be completed. And then of course you could, let's say you don't want to take the default definitions, you want to make your own custom ones, you can do that as well. And then what generally happens and kind of is a best practice is usually for your specific org, no matter how many subordinates you have, you kind of all are following the same kind of workflows. If there are anything that's kind of really different, then you use conditional logic. Let's say, I don't know, if you're part of the talent organization, there's an extra step probably in your BP. You'll just make sure that you have it configured, but then that way you only have one BP that you need to manage. Right now, what we've been doing kind of just in training, just because we have that kind of access and we're making dummy data, but in general, on a customer's tenant, you're not going to be making dummy data. So you'll use, just like for hire, let's say you might just have one hire BP, because just imagine trying to, like, if there's an org-wide change and you have like 6 or 7 BPs out there that weren't really needed, they could have all been just one BP. Now you have like a maintenance headache, right, to update all these BPs. So let me take a look. Kind of touched on all of this is, the ordering matters, which we'll kind of go through. So let me, I think just, oh, this is, I guess, a good one. So let me just go back here. In terms of, the same thing that we've been talking about, like making sure when you're configuring, just that you're having an ordering, and we'll go into more detail about that, but there's a specific ordering that the workflow needs to happen. There's some steps that could be in parallel, but there's always going to be like, okay, this must happen. And then, you're going to take this next step. So everything kind of happens in sequential order, but you can have the option of having things happen in parallel, right? Maybe you need both things to occur before it moves to the next step. So you can accomplish that as well. And then, like I said, you can have things routed and you kind of have seen this, right? Like when I'm firing off a BP and I forget to create my own BP for that org, it goes and sits in Logan McNeil's inbox. Like, these are unassigned tasks because I haven't created that Workday account for these users. So it ends up coming to someone, usually Logan, to go ahead and be like, hey, this event is kind of stuck here, but I don't know who I'm supposed to be going to, because the person that you have here, they don't have a Workday account, because otherwise it would be routed to that individual's inbox, or they would get an email notification. It all depends on how they have notifications configured on the BP. And here are examples, right, of these configurable VPs. Whenever you go into a tenant, especially if you're implementing, and that's generally the folks that kind of need to understand this, I guess, a little bit more, is that there's all these delivered default definitions for VPs. So you have ones that are related for staffing, so create position, create job requisition, contingent worker, hire, terminate, change job. And I think the next few slides just go kind of by specific areas and the ones that are kind of used most heavily. So request one-time payment, stock grant, compensation change, compensation hire is all around compensation. And then benefit events, the typical ones, change benefits for open enrollment, change retirement savings. And 1 second. And then here's the one, time off, leave request, the general ones where an employee is requesting time off, requesting leave of absence, or either correcting their time off, and then a manager probably is doing request return from leave of absence. So all of these are just workflows in Workday that are configurable. And here's the one for personal data. Again, probably initiated by the employee and it's going to get routed to maybe an HR first, maybe a manager, but in this case, most likely just an HR partner, and probably some of these might cause like a change in benefits and all that other fun stuff. So let's see. What else is on here? Yeah. So just like what I was saying, you can have several VPs, and then maybe you need to string them kind of all together. So the sub process, so over here, you probably initiated the hire, but the sub process is the proposed compensation. So the stuff that's in green, this may just be just part of this business process, the hire process. And after this is complete, it'll go back to, so it'll complete the sub business process and then just go back to the main hire VP and then complete it. So, you can configure it in this VP if you want it to behave differently through those conditionals that I was saying that we'll get into in a little bit. Or you could just have separate VPs for each of those orgs. And I think that's what it's here. So when you go ahead and link a VP to a specific org, and we'll kind of see that, it'll be like if you do VP hire, and let's actually do, all right. So with this one, right, like these prefixes over here, like these are the ones that kind of Workday has delivered that you can use. So if I instead of putting ad hoc payment template, if this is the one that I'm constantly using, let me just put payment and then colon, and then this is the part that should be coming up. And so the one for business process, yeah. And so, I mean, you could probably get to the same thing using these sides, but what I generally use is just this VP hire, and then, or if you're looking for a specific organization, right, org those are kind of the, or if you're looking for a specific report field, CRF So usually, this is interesting. I've never seen the acquisition one up on top, but it's probably doing it by alphabetical order here for what's in the parentheses. But generally, most of the time when you're searching for stuff, you'll see, let's do position instead. There's just a lot of junk data in this tenant, but generally you'll have the default definition kind of on top. And since I didn't put create position, which is the one that I was really going for, it kind of brought back all these other VPs that are also part of it. The acquisition, I guess, is the thing. Let me go back to hire now because I wanted to talk about one more thing. Okay, so hire default definition is over here. And for all of them that Workday has delivered, it's always going to be default definition. And then it's up to you to like, do you want it for specific orgs like this one? This is probably just initially the way it was created was, copying the default definition and then changing it to what they'd like. So let's see what's the difference. And the way that this happens is as soon as an org is associated to a business process, then you're always going to have the name uh, uh, right after. So hire for global modern services. If I did one for the ZaranTech one, hire for the ZaranTech company, and then you can go ahead and configure it however you like. But generally, again, you'll just go ahead and normally just look at the default definition and see what you need to change or update. And again, when you're working at a customer site, so not an implementer, you're probably not going to have to touch this as much. It's already going to be configured for you. It's just good to know what BP it's following, what are all the steps in it, and kind of familiarizing yourself with it. So this one is the default definition. And if you didn't associate a BP, so let's say I never did that copy, create, or link, any org, wherever you're doing this, that doesn't have this BP associated, like a higher BP associated specifically for that org, it's just going to default to this default definition. Let's see what this error is. Oh, we'll get into that, but this person didn't configure this the right way. So let me take a step back and kind of just look at my notes and see what I have missed and what I want to go over. Okay, I am just going to read through some of my notes, so just make sure that things are clear and that I haven't overlooked anything. So hopefully, we've kind of solidified, again, like a BP. It's just kind of defining the workflow, so a workflow suite, so that way you can define the way your business operates. You can view the business process definition. We'll go ahead and get to see how you edit it. And then the other aspect of this is actually adding notifications to the BPs. So certain people are notified when things are initiated. You could go ahead and notify them when so when the business process kicks off, when a particular step starts or completes, or even when the whole business process completes. And then conditionals. So let's say all of this, and we'll get into that a little bit, is doing if statements to see if based on this criteria, if it meets this criteria, it needs to do this step. If it doesn't, then it just moves on to the next step. And always try to make sure that you associate the BP at the highest org level, so that way there's not too much maintenance. You can always customize it, you can always copy it or create a new one. Okay, and what you are seeing here, we kind of touched on those pieces. Oh, I forgot to show this report. So with everything, it's always nice to know some of the reports that are available. So when I click on this, right, kind of, I mean, of course, it's still going to do just one window, but it got rid of like all the other stuff on top. I don't know. oh yeah, you can change the ordering around and stuff. And this is only enabled on certain things. I haven't seen it across the board. What's this? If you want to filter, but you kind of do that filtering on the over here. You don't necessarily need to do it there. And then let's see this one. Worksheets. I haven't worked very closely with worksheets, but it's kind of like Workday's version of Excel.
It's a downloadable version, right? So it downloads the data
No,
into that. No?
no. So that's this one, this Excel one, export to Excel. This will do that and you'll be able to just download it and then open it up. This one is worksheets where you're still kind of in the tenant, but I think you need to have like Prism enabled, Drive enabled, and it's basically you're still in Workday using kind of Excel, but Workday's version of Excel to kind of write back things or calculate things and stuff. I haven't worked that closely with it. It hasn't ever met my customers' needs. And then there's usually some performance issues too, if you're kind of doing a large volume. So most
Okay.
customers have kind of steered clear of it, but I know that they're continuing to work on this. And I feel like the areas that it generally helps is if you have interesting reporting needs or if with financial stuff is where I've seen people talk more about worksheets. But okay, so that's the UI. Let me see before I go over. Okay, I will come back to that. Now, let's okay. So I keep on talking about, right, like linking your specific org to a specific workflow. So if you know, and we've used this several times, right, copy or link, and this, that's not it. Oh, because I'm going the wrong way. So let me go, I wonder if ZaranTech is still in here. That's so interesting. 1 second, let me just figure out. This is the issue with working with these shared tenants. Sometimes there's so much dummy data. I just want to understand what's in there. I see. Okay. So let's say I am in operations. I know this goes against everything that I was just saying to you all, that make sure that you always assign the BP at the topmost level. But over here, let's go ahead and for this specific org, the operations org, I want to assign a specific higher BP. So let's business process definitions for business object. Let's see if there's anything for hire. There probably is. It's probably inherited, but let's see. Yeah. So there is this higher BP, right? And it was set at the top most org. Steve Morgan kind of owns like the top level. But now what I want to do is actually take away, let's say they're actually following a whole different kind of business process, but I want to go ahead and make my own adjustments to it. So I'll do create copy or link definition. I'll say the higher. So what it's going to do is look for the default definition and or actually business process type is just letting you know kind of what's this workflow kind of related to. So it's related to this specific business process type hire. And I could either copy existing definition, I could link an existing definition, or none of the above. So let me walk through kind of what are the differences. Copy existing definition is actually going to just create a duplicate, right? But that new duplicate, that new copy is what's going to be associated with the hire process. And you can go ahead independently update now the configuration of the BP. So if you have like a couple of steps that are really different or overall very different from the one that's related to the rest of the org, then that's where you would copy. But if I wanted to link the existing definition, just to make sure, like, you know, generally at the top level, if you go ahead and what's the thing, link it or assign a BP, then you don't have to do it at the subordinate levels, right? Because everything is just going to get inherited. But let's say you wanted to link it to an existing definition for something completely outside of this org. Maybe, I don't know, New Zealand has a different hire process and their org setup is very different. Then you would just go ahead and link existing definition. So really what it is here is, one is really making a duplicate and just making sure that they're kind of independent of one another. So if you make a change in one, it's not going to affect the other one. But of course, then it's more maintenance. But if you're linking existing definition, it's basically like now these two orgs share the same VP. So if you change it for one, it's going to go ahead and affect the other org as well. So that's the main difference. And if it's none of the above, then you basically just get, and we'll just do that. If you do none of the above, and now you see, right, it went to hire for operations. If you do none of the above, here's that initiating step that doesn't have anything really in it.
So I'm a little bit confused here. So
Yeah.
if it's none of the above, that means you're creating a brand new business process.
Exactly. Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're copying an existing definition, even though it's creating a duplicate, if I have to modify it, how does that work there? Because there's, if I'm not able to modify it, what's the point in copying an existing definition?
Oh, you can copy. So let's do that. I canceled out of the other one. So the one that starts it off is country is not US, termination is involuntary. So these are all the conditionals that they're to do. So they can all be done in parallel. So you see how many Fs are listed. So all that is all of this stuff, kind of like, if this is yes, then you should do this. If, and it could be that several of these, again, like, I don't know how this one is really configured. I haven't sat down and seen what this person did, but it could be that, you know, the employee falls into a number of these and all of these are going to get fired at the same time. And they might just be going to the same person's inbox. So that's what this is, parallel step in inbox order. If for whatever reason you want to change the order that it shows up in somebody's inbox, you can do that here. So that's what that is. And then let's just go back up to this one. So you see over here, termination is involuntary, both of them, but one of them is going to this HR executive and the other one is going to the manager's manager. So both of these are going to be done at the same time, and it's not going to, before it moves on to the next step, it's going to make sure that both of these are completed before it moves on to the next step, because both of these you can't skip. They're not optional, but we'll go into that a little bit more. I'm going to skip over this until I actually create a conditional, but this is where, right, termination is involuntary. If it's however this condition is set up, and let's see. And oops. See new tab. So kind of just like with the compensation, I believe we set up condition rules, right? Like if you're in India, you get, and you're a manager, you get these, this allowance plan. If you're in the US, you get this allowance plan. So it's kind of the same thing. You're just creating these conditions. And over here, what is it saying? It's saying involuntary termination. So basically, I guess they got fired is equal to yes. Then that's where this step is going to get kicked off, right? But let's say, you know, they resigned, then they're not going to, I mean, sorry, if it's yes, then this step is going to get kicked off. If it's no, then it just skips this step. They don't need this approval from the HR executive or the manager's manager. So that's how that works. And that's why you don't need several different VPs for different things. You can kind of accomplish it through conditionals. Does that make sense? The best way to make sure that I fully understand the problem we're trying to get at. So if I think about this, right, like just because you kicked off the hire BP doesn't mean you've actually hired the person until the completion step. So if there's particular information that you need before the individual is hired, you can go ahead and put the steps, the conditionals, whatever you'd like. And then once the BP is completed, then the person's going to be hired. So let's say your job code, for instance, even though that's not really part of, let me just go with this one. There's several. But basically, this is questionnaire, and this is for exit interview. And let's say in your BP for this termination, you want the employee to answer an exit interview questionnaire. You can add it, or you can go ahead and, like, let's say there's one for the manager, for them to instead fill out about this person. You can totally do that. So what this looks like is something like this that'll show up in the person's inbox, in the Workday inbox, is what is your main reason for leaving? And then they could select this. And then how would you rate your work quality, workload, right? So let's say exactly like what we're saying, and I'm digressing. See, I tried to hit a decimal point. It's not going to let me do that.